Courage is an interesting thing. It's been said to have made the Sphinx the seventh wonder and make the dawn come up like thunder. Feats no less impressive than putting the ape in apricot. But despite the enormity of its power, courage is often found in surprisingly small places. In this case, a matryoshka doll no taller than a thimble. You can't help but applaud the team at Double Fine Productions. In the 6 years since they debuted with the multi-award-winning Psychonauts, a few denominators have been common across all their projects: charm, originality, and really spectacular art direction. With the presentation of a century-old silent film and a set of Russian nesting dolls as its cast, this irresistible gem fits snugly within the Double Fine lineage. Released last month to the Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network, the game is called Stacking. Now granted, there may not be much creative punch to the title, but it does eloquently sum up what this conversely creative game is all about: stacking wooden dolls to solve puzzles. Of course, what it doesn't quite convey is how charming the game is, and how quickly you'll become enamored of its whimsical, wonderful world. To see that, well, you just have to start stacking yourself. Now, as playful as it may be, the premise is juxtaposed with a somber story, and that's one of the most interesting aspects of stacking. Charlie is a little boy whose family has been forced into slave labor. Of course, he also has courage, and dressed only in rags and worn suspenders, he sets off to free a captive workforce from their oppressors. Stacking touches on some pretty heavy subject matter, but strange as it may seem, given that this is basically a game in which you play with dolls, it actually works beautifully. The story unfolds with gorgeous cutscenes, mimicking the style of silent films from the early 1900s. The little matryoshka dolls pantomime the story on grainy film with help from title cards, and it's as stylish a recreation as it is an homage. The presentation really adds character to Stacking, a game that isn't exactly short on character to begin with. Much of that comes from the gameplay itself. Stacking is essentially a 3D adventure game based on solving puzzles. You're given a series of objectives, and it's your job to figure out how to complete them. Most of the game is spent simply exploring and talking to people around you and trying to figure out the best way to solve the problem. And there are plenty of ways to solve the problem. Charlie is a bit too small to do anything himself, but he does have courage. The game's main mechanic is finding a doll one size bigger than you and stacking them, basically taking over their body. This is a really clever gameplay mechanic based on the Russian matryoshka dolls, which date back to the late 1800s. And as it applies to the game, it allows you to control that character and therefore use their abilities. Charlie encounters plenty of different people on his adventure, each of whom has their own skills or even notoriety. And you never know who you might need to stack to solve a puzzle. Usually each objective has several different solutions, and that's part of the game's appeal. You can always go back to prior levels and re-solve past puzzles or figure out the solutions you didn't figure out before. It does make the puzzles feel kind of alive, because the answers are always based on taking a logical look at the personalities around you. Oh, granted, the puzzles are rarely difficult, but they don't really need to be. This isn't a game you play for a challenge or to blast through in an afternoon. The value of stacking hinges on the enjoyment of exploring its world and talking to its citizens and thinking creatively to help them. If you're into games that absorb you with great style and really clever gameplay mechanics, stacking is very easy to get into.